Mother Bear led doctors to a lost baby in the neonatal unit. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The rain hammered against the windows of Pine Valley Hospital like angry fists demanding entry. Dr. Zara Blackwood pulled her cardigan tighter as she walked through the dimly lit corridors, her footsteps echoing in the unusual quiet of the night shift. The neonatal unit sat at the far end of the building, surrounded by thick forest that seemed to press against the glass walls like a living thing. Something felt wrong tonight. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that had been gnawing at her since she'd arrived for her shift 3 hours ago. The air itself seemed charged with an energy she couldn't name, and the babies in the unit had been restless, their tiny cries piercing the silence more frequently than usual. "Dr. Blackwood?" Nurse Ivy Chen approached from behind, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been checking on the babies, and there's something strange happening." Zara turned, noting the concern etched across Ivy's face. "What kind of strange?" "They keep looking toward the forest side windows. All of them, even the ones who usually sleep through everything." Ivy's hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the unit. "And there's this sound coming from outside, like something's calling." The two women walked together toward the neonatal unit, their soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished floor. As they approached the glass doors, Zara noticed the security lights flickering strangely, casting dancing shadows across the hallway. "Listen," Ivy whispered, stopping suddenly. Through the storm, beneath the thunder and rain, came a low, mournful sound. It wasn't quite a howl, but something deeper, more primal. The sound seemed to vibrate through the building itself, and Zara felt her heart skip a beat. "That's not coming from the forest," she said, her voice tight with realization. "It's coming from right outside our doors." They entered the neonatal unit, where 6 tiny babies lay in their incubators, each one monitored by machines that beeped steadily in the background. But tonight the babies weren't sleeping, their small heads turned toward the large windows that faced the forest, their dark eyes wide and alert. "This is impossible," Zara murmured, moving from incubator to incubator. "Newborns this young don't track movement or focus on specific directions like this." Ivy joined her, checking each baby's vital signs. "Their heart rates are elevated, but not dangerously so. It's like they're excited or expectant." The mournful sound came again, closer this time, and one of the babies, a little girl born just 2 days ago, made a soft cooing noise in response. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Did she just answer back? Before Ivy could respond, the security lights outside suddenly blazed to life, illuminating the parking area and the edge of the forest beyond. In the harsh white light, a massive shape moved between the trees, too large to be anything domestic, too purposeful to be random. "We need to call security," Ivy said, reaching for her phone. "Wait." Zara pressed her hand gently on Ivy's arm. "Look at the babies." All 6 infants had gone completely still, their tiny faces turned toward the windows with an intensity that made Zara's skin prickle. The machines continued their steady beeping, but the babies themselves seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for something. The shape in the forest moved again, stepping partially into the light. Zara's heart nearly stopped. It was a bear, a massive brown bear, standing upright on her hind legs, her dark eyes fixed directly on the neonatal unit windows. "Oh my God," Ivy breathed. "She's looking right at us." But the bear wasn't looking at them. As Zara watched, frozen in place, she realized the bear's gaze was focused on the babies themselves. The animal's posture wasn't threatening, it was almost protective, watchful. The bear lowered herself to all fours and began moving along the edge of the parking lot, never taking her eyes off the building. She moved with purpose, as if she was patrolling, guarding something precious. "This doesn't make sense," Zara whispered. "Bears don't behave like this. They avoid human contact, especially around buildings and lights." "Maybe she's sick?" Ivy suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. The bear stopped directly in front of the main entrance to their wing of the hospital, just 50 yards from where they stood. In the harsh security lighting, Zara could see the animal's fur was matted with rain, her massive frame heaving with each breath. But what struck her most was the bear's eyes. They held an intelligence, an awareness that seemed almost human. As if sensing their scrutiny, the bear's head turned toward the neonatal unit windows. For a moment that stretched into eternity, woman and bear stared at each other across the distance. Then the bear did something that made Zara's blood run cold. She nodded. A slow, deliberate movement of her great head, as if acknowledging Zara's presence and approving of what she saw. "We need to document this," Zara said, her voice shaking. "No one will believe us otherwise." But as she reached for her phone, every single baby in the unit began to cry at once. Not the usual fussy cries of hungry or uncomfortable infants, but urgent, demanding wails that seemed to echo the mournful sound coming from outside. The bear's head snapped up, her ears pricked forward. She took several steps toward the building, then stopped, as if restraining herself. The crying continued, growing louder, and Zara realized with growing horror that the babies weren't crying randomly. They were calling to her. "Ivy," Zara said, her voice barely audible over the infants' cries. "How many babies did we admit today?" Ivy's face went pale as she quickly counted the incubators. 6. We have 6 babies. "And how many are supposed to be here tonight?" Ivy's hands flew to her mouth as the realization hit her. 7. The Morrison baby came in this afternoon, baby girl Morrison. They both turned to look at the incubators again, counting more carefully this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 babies, all accounted for and crying desperately. But where was the 7th? Outside, the bear had moved closer to the building, her massive paws leaving prints in the muddy ground. She was no longer just watching, she was waiting, as if she knew something they didn't, as if she knew exactly where baby girl Morrison was. Zara's hands trembled as she grabbed the patient registry from the nurse's station. Her eyes scanned the handwritten entries, looking for any trace of baby girl Morrison's whereabouts. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows across the pages. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry made at 3:47 p.m. "Baby girl Morrison, admitted for respiratory monitoring. Mother's name is Rebecca Morrison. Father is David Morrison. Birth weight 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Ivy leaned over her shoulder, reading the notes. "It says she was placed in incubator 7, but we only have 6 incubators in this unit. Where's incubator 7? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Zara had worked in this neonatal unit for 8 years, and there had never been a 7th incubator. She looked around the room again, counting the familiar white machines that hummed quietly in their designated spots. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "There is no incubator 7. Outside, the bear had moved even closer to the building. She now stood directly beneath the large windows, her dark eyes still fixed on the babies inside. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, but the wind continued to howl through the trees, creating an almost musical backdrop to the increasingly urgent cries of the infants. "Wait," Ivy said suddenly, her voice sharp with realization. "Look at the signature on this admission form." Zara squinted at the barely legible handwriting at the bottom of the page. The signature was rushed, almost illegible, but she could make out the first letter, a looping D followed by what looked like Thomas or Thompson. "Dr. Thompson?" Zara frowned. "But he's not scheduled to work today. He called in sick this morning with some kind of family emergency." Then who admitted baby girl Morrison? The baby's cries had synchronized into an almost rhythmic pattern, rising and falling like a strange lullaby. Outside, the bear responded with low, rumbling sounds that seemed to calm the infant slightly. Zara watched in fascination as the massive animal began to pace back and forth beneath the windows, never taking her eyes off the babies. "She's trying to comfort them," Zara realized aloud. "The bear is trying to comfort our babies." Ivy stared at her colleague in disbelief. "That's impossible. Bears don't have maternal instincts toward human children." "But look at her behavior. She's not aggressive or territorial. She's protective, nurturing even." Zara pressed her face against the cool glass of the window. "And the babies are responding to her. They're calming down when she makes those sounds." As if to prove her point, the bear let out another low, soothing rumble, and all 6 babies immediately quieted to soft whimpers. The sudden silence was almost more unsettling than their cries had been. "We need to find baby girl Morrison," Zara said, turning away from the window. "And we need to figure out who really admitted her, and where she's supposed to be." They began a systematic search of the unit, checking every corner, every closet, every possible space where a newborn might have been placed. The incubators were numbered 1 through 6, arranged in a neat row along the far wall. There was no space for a 7th, and certainly no indication that one had ever existed. "The medication room," Ivy suggested, pointing to a small door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." "Maybe someone put her in there temporarily." Zara fumbled with her keys, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and growing fear. The medication room was barely large enough for one person, lined with locked cabinets containing various drugs and medical supplies. There was no baby there, but something else caught her attention. A small piece of paper crumpled on the floor. She picked it up and smoothed it out carefully. It was a hospital wristband, the kind placed on newborns immediately after birth. In small, printed letters it read, "Morrison, baby girl. Dobb, today's date. Mother, Rebecca Morrison." "She was here," Zara said, holding up the wristband. "Baby girl Morrison was definitely in this hospital today. But where is she now?" Ivy's voice cracked with emotion. "A newborn can't just disappear from a secure unit like this." They returned to the main area of the neonatal unit, where the babies had begun to stir restlessly again. Outside, the bear had stopped pacing and was now sitting on her haunches, still watching the windows with unwavering attention. Her posture reminded Zara of a faithful dog waiting for its owner to return. "I'm going to call security," Ivy said, reaching for the phone. "This is beyond what we can handle ourselves." But before she could dial, the lights in the entire unit suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The baby's monitors continued to beep steadily, powered by backup batteries, but the sudden darkness made everything feel more urgent, more dangerous. "Power outage?" Zara asked, though she knew it wasn't. The rest of the hospital's lights were still visible through the windows. Only their unit had lost power. In the red emergency lighting, the bear outside seemed larger, more imposing. But instead of being frightened by the darkness, she appeared to become more alert, more active. She stood up and began moving around the perimeter of the building, as if searching for something. Look, Ivy whispered, pointing toward the forest. There's someone out there. Zara followed her gaze and saw a small figure moving between the trees, barely visible in the storm. The figure was too far away to make out clearly, but it appeared to be carrying something. Is that a person? Zara squinted into the darkness. What are they doing out there in this weather? The bear had noticed the figure too. She turned away from the hospital building and began moving toward the forest, her massive form disappearing into the shadows between the trees. For the first time since they'd spotted her, the bear's attention was focused on something other than the babies. We have to follow her, Zara said suddenly. Are you insane? Ivy stared at her in disbelief. You want to go out there in the middle of a storm to follow a wild bear. Don't you see? She's been trying to tell us something all night. The babies know it too. That's why they've been so agitated. Something is wrong, and she's the only one who knows what it is. The emergency lighting flickered, and in that brief moment of brighter illumination, Zara saw something that made her heart stop. In the forest, barely visible through the rain and darkness, the figure was moving toward the hospital. And in their arms, wrapped in what looked like a hospital blanket, was something small and precious. Something that looked exactly like a newborn baby. Oh my God, she breathed. That's her. That's baby girl Morrison. The bear had reached the figure now, and instead of attacking, she was circling them protectively, as if guarding both the person and their precious cargo. The figure stopped moving and seemed to be talking to the bear, though no words were audible over the storm. Who is that person? Ivy whispered. And why do they have our missing baby? Zara was already moving toward the door. I don't know, but we're going to find out. Get the portable incubator and the emergency medical kit. If that baby has been out there in this cold, she's going to need immediate care. Zara, wait, Ivy called after her. What if it's dangerous? What if whoever took the baby is armed or unstable? Zara paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Then we'll deal with that when we have to. But right now, there's a newborn baby out there in the middle of a storm, and she needs our help. As if responding to her words, the bear's voice rose above the wind. Not a roar or a growl, but a sound that was almost like a mother calling her child home. And from somewhere in the forest, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a baby crying. The emergency lights flickered again, and when they steadied, Zara could see that the figure in the forest had begun moving toward the hospital again, the bear still circling protectively around them. Whatever was happening, whatever had brought them all together on this strange, stormy night, it was far from over. And deep in her heart, Zara knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The emergency medical kit felt heavier than usual as Zara slung it over her shoulder. Ivy wheeled the portable incubator behind her, its battery-powered heating system humming softly in the red-lit corridor. The babies they were leaving behind had grown quiet again, as if sensing the gravity of what was about to happen. Are you sure about this? Ivy asked one more time as they approached the main entrance. Maybe we should wait for security or call the police? Zara paused at the glass doors, watching the figure in the forest grow closer. The bear continued her protective circling, and now Zara could see that the person was struggling against the wind and rain, moving slowly and deliberately toward the hospital. Look at them, she said softly. Whoever that is, they're not running away. They're coming to us. They want help. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and immediately the storm hit them full force. Rain stung Zara's face, and the wind nearly knocked her off balance. But she pressed forward, Ivy close behind her, both women fighting against the elements as they made their way across the parking lot. The bear noticed them first. She stopped her circling and turned to face them, Her massive head tilted slightly as if assessing their intentions. For a moment, Zara feared the animal might charge, but instead, the bear made a sound that was almost like a welcoming chuff. "She's saying hello," Zara realized, her voice barely audible over the storm. "She's actually greeting us." The figure in the forest had stopped moving and was now standing at the edge of the tree line, watching their approach. As they got closer, Zara could make out more details. It was a woman, probably in her 40s, wearing what looked like hospital scrubs beneath a soaked raincoat. Her hair was plastered to her head, and she was shivering violently. But it was what she carried that made Zara's heart race. Wrapped in a hospital blanket, pressed protectively against the woman's chest, was a tiny baby. Even from a distance, Zara could see the infant's small face, peaceful and seemingly unaware of the chaos around her. "Please," the woman called out when they were close enough to hear. "Please help her." "I didn't know what else to do." The bear moved to stand between the woman and the approaching doctors, not aggressively, but as if she were presenting them to each other. The animal's dark eyes moved from Zara to the woman and back again, and Zara had the strangest feeling that the bear was trying to communicate something important. "I'm Doctor." "Blackwood," Zara said, raising her voice to be heard over the wind. "This is Nurse Chen. We're here to help. Is that baby girl Morrison?" The woman's face crumpled with relief and she nodded frantically. Yes, it is. My name is Linda Hoffman. I was a nurse here, years ago." "Was?" Ivy questioned, but Zara held up a hand to silence her. "Let's get everyone inside first," Zara said. "The baby needs to be warmed up and examined." But as they turned to head back to the hospital, the bear moved to block their path. She planted herself firmly in front of them, not menacingly but with clear purpose. Her eyes were fixed on Linda, and she made a low, questioning rumble. "She wants to know something," Linda said, her voice shaking. "She's been with me all night. She found me when I took the baby." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "You took her? From the hospital?" "I had to," Linda said, tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. "You don't understand. There's something wrong with the records, something very wrong. And if I hadn't taken her—" She trailed off, looking down at the baby in her arms. The infant was remarkably calm, considering the circumstances, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. "What's wrong with the records?" Ivy asked, her professional instincts overriding her confusion. Linda looked up at them, her eyes filled with fear. "Baby girl Morrison died 3 days ago, in the NICU at St. Mary's Hospital across town. I saw the death certificate myself." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. "That's impossible. She's right here. She's alive." "I know," Linda whispered, "but according to the official records, this baby should be dead, and someone is going to great lengths to make sure she disappears." The bear made another sound, this one more urgent, and began moving toward the hospital. She would take a few steps, then look back at them, clearly wanting them to follow. "She's trying to tell us something," Zara said, watching the animal's behavior. "She's been here all night watching over the babies. She knows something we don't." They followed the bear back toward the hospital, Linda clutching the baby protectively. As they walked, she began to explain what had happened, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I work at St. Mary's now, have for the past 5 years. 3 days ago, we had a baby girl brought in from a car accident. The parents were killed instantly, but the baby survived. Rebecca and David Morrison." She paused, struggling to continue. "The baby was in critical condition. We did everything we could, but she died after 6 hours." "Then who is this?" Ivy asked, gesturing toward the infant in Linda's arms. "I don't know," Linda admitted. But when I saw the admission papers at St. Mary's, I recognized the names. Rebecca Morrison had been my patient before 2 years ago. She had complications with her first pregnancy and lost the baby. She was devastated. They had reached the hospital entrance, but the bear was still blocking their path. She seemed to be waiting for something. Her attention focused on the building behind them. "There's more," Linda continued. "After the baby died at St. Mary's, her body disappeared from the morgue. Someone signed her out using forged credentials. And then today, I got a call from someone claiming to be Dr. Thompson, asking me to transport a baby to this hospital for specialized care." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "Dr. Thompson called in sick today. He's been dealing with a family emergency." "I know," Linda said grimly, "because I called to verify the transfer and his office said he was out of town. But by then, I had already picked up the baby from the address I was given. A house on Maple Street, about 10 miles from here." "Whose house?" Ivy asked. Linda's face went pale. "It was supposed to be a private residence where the baby was being cared for by a relative. But when I got there, the house was empty, completely empty, and there was a woman there I'd never seen before, with this baby." She handed her over without any questions, without any paperwork except a fake medical transfer form. The bear suddenly turned away from them and began walking around the perimeter of the hospital building. She moved with purpose, nose to the ground, as if following a scent trail. "Follow her," Zara said instinctively. "She's trying to show us something." They tracked the bear around to the back of the hospital, where the service entrance and loading dock were located. The area was normally well lit, but several of the security lights had been deliberately broken, leaving large patches of darkness. The bear stopped at the service entrance and began pawing at the door, making soft whining sounds. Linda gasped and pointed to a vehicle parked in the shadows, a white van with no license plates. "That's the van," she said. "The woman at the house was loading boxes into a van just like that when I left with the baby." Zara's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. "Someone is using our hospital as part of some kind of operation. They're moving babies, probably for illegal adoption or worse." "But why forge Dr. Thompson's signature?" Ivy asked. "Why involve our neonatal unit?" Before anyone could answer, the service door suddenly opened from the inside. A man in hospital scrubs stepped out, talking quietly on a cell phone. He was tall and thin, with graying hair and a nervous manner. When he saw them standing there, he froze. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then slipped it into his pocket. "Can I help you?" The bear's behavior changed immediately. She rose up on her hind legs, towering over all of them, and let out a warning growl that made the man take several steps backward. "Who are you?" Zara demanded. "What are you doing here?" The man's eyes darted between them and the bear, clearly calculating his options. "I'm Dr. Patterson. I'm here to pick up a patient transfer." "At 2 in the morning?" Through the service entrance, Ivy stepped forward, her voice sharp with suspicion. "What kind of patient transfer?" "A special case," he said, backing toward the van. "High-risk infant. Needs to be moved to a specialized facility." Linda clutched the baby tighter. "He's one of them. He's part of whatever's happening here." Dr. Patterson's mask slipped, and his face hardened. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This is bigger than you know. That baby has already been processed. She's supposed to be dead." "Processed?" Zara felt sick. "You're talking about a human baby like she's a piece of merchandise." "She is," Patterson said coldly. "Do you have any idea how much money people will pay for a healthy newborn, especially one that officially doesn't exist?" The bear dropped to all fours and began advancing on Patterson, her massive form rippling with barely contained power. The man fumbled for his keys, panic clear in his movements. "You're selling babies," Ivy said, her voice filled with horror. "You're part of a baby trafficking ring." Patterson reached the van and yanked open the driver's door. "You can't stop this. We have buyers waiting, contracts signed. This baby has a new family waiting for her." "A family that paid for her?" Zara was shaking with rage. "You're talking about human trafficking." "I'm talking about giving unwanted babies good homes," Patterson shot back. "These children would otherwise end up in the system, forgotten and unloved. We're providing a service." The bear was now within striking distance of the van. She rose up again, her massive paws extended, and Patterson scrambled inside the vehicle. But as he tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The bear had somehow disabled the van. "The phones," Linda said suddenly. "We need to call the police. This is evidence of a major crime." But as Ivy reached for her phone, Patterson pulled out a gun from inside the van. "Nobody move," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "I'm taking that baby and I'm leaving. Don't try to stop me." The bear's response was immediate and terrifying. She charged the van with a roar that shook the ground beneath their feet. Patterson fired once, the shot going wide before the bear's massive paw connected with the van's door, slamming it shut with Patterson inside. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by the sound of the storm and Patterson's muffled shouts from inside the van, Zara realized they had stumbled into something far more dangerous and complex than a simple missing baby case. And somewhere in the darkness of the hospital behind them, there were likely other people involved in this operation. People who would soon realize that their carefully planned scheme was falling apart. The baby in Linda's arms began to cry softly, as if sensing the tension around her. The bear immediately calmed, turning her attention to the infant and making soft, comforting sounds. She's protecting her, Zara realized. The bear has been protecting this baby all along. But from what? And why? The questions hung in the air as they stood in the storm: a newborn baby, a former nurse, 2 hospital workers, and a massive bear who seemed to understand more about the situation than any of them did. And in the van, Patterson's shouts had grown more desperate, suggesting that he knew something they didn't, something that made the stakes even higher than they had imagined. The baby's cries grew louder, cutting through the storm like a blade through silence. Linda rocked her gently, but the infant seemed inconsolable, her tiny fists waving in the air as if reaching for something beyond their understanding. The bear moved closer, her massive head lowering until she was almost touching the blanket that wrapped the child. "Look," Ivy whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "She's calming down." It was true. As soon as the bear's warm breath touched the baby's face, the crying stopped. The infant's dark eyes opened wide, focusing on the bear's face with an intensity that seemed impossible for a newborn. For a moment, the storm seemed to quiet around them, as if nature itself was holding its breath. "This isn't natural," Zara said, but her voice held no fear, only amazement. "Babies this young don't have the visual capacity to focus like that, and they certainly don't respond to wild animals with recognition." Linda's face had gone pale, and she was staring down at the baby in her arms with growing realization. "There's something else," she said slowly. "Something I didn't tell you before. When I picked up this baby from that house, the woman who gave her to me said something strange." "What?" Zara asked, keeping one eye on Patterson's van, where the muffled sounds of struggle continued. "She said the baby had been specially prepared for her new family, that she had been given treatments to make the transition easier." Linda's voice shook. I thought she meant medical treatments. But now... The bear suddenly lifted her head, her ears pricked forward, listening to something they couldn't hear. She turned toward the forest, then back to the hospital, then to the forest again, clearly agitated about something. What is it, girl? Zara found herself speaking to the bear as if she were a trusted dog. What do you hear? As if in answer, the sound of engines became audible over the storm. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast from different directions. The bear's agitation increased, and she began to circle them protectively, her massive form a barrier between them and the approaching sounds. We need to get inside, Ivy said urgently. If Patterson's partners are coming. But Linda shook her head violently. No, we can't go back to the hospital, don't you see? They've been using the hospital as their base of operations. There could be more of them inside, more people involved in this. The headlights appeared through the trees, sweeping across the parking lot as two black SUVs pulled into the hospital grounds. The vehicles moved with military precision, positioning themselves to block all exits. They're surrounding us, Zara breathed. The bear seemed to understand the danger. She nudged Linda forcefully toward the forest, then looked back at Zara and Ivy, clearly expecting them to follow. When they hesitated, she made a sound that was almost like frustration. She wants us to run, Ivy realized. She's trying to lead us to safety. But where? Zara looked around desperately. We're in the middle of nowhere, and there's a baby who needs medical attention. Linda was already moving toward the tree line, following the bear's lead. The baby's been out here for hours already, and she's stable. Right now, staying here is more dangerous than going with her. The SUVs had stopped, and dark figures were emerging from them. Even in the dim light, Zara could see they were armed and moving with professional efficiency. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were organized, trained, and prepared for exactly this situation. Dr. Blackwood, a voice called across the parking lot, amplified by a megaphone. We know you're there. Come out with your hands visible and no one will be hurt. The bear's response was immediate and fierce. She reared up on her hind legs and roared, a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very air around them. The men, advancing across the parking lot, stopped in their tracks, clearly not having expected to deal with a wild animal. How do they know my name? Zara whispered. But even as she asked the question, she began to understand. The hospital records. They've been monitoring the hospital systems probably for months. They know who works here, who might stumble across their operation. Linda had reached the edge of the forest and was looking back at them urgently. Come on, she knows where to go. The bear dropped to all fours and began moving into the trees, but she stopped every few steps to make sure they were following. Her path seemed random at first, weaving between thick trunks and over fallen logs, but gradually Zara realized there was method to it. The bear was avoiding the open spaces where they might be visible from the hospital, staying in the densest parts of the forest where the canopy provided cover. Behind them, shouts echoed through the storm as their pursuers spread out to search. Flashlight beams swept back and forth between the trees, but the bear seemed to know exactly where to go to avoid them. How does she know the forest so well? Ivy panted, struggling to keep up while pushing the portable incubator through the undergrowth. This is her territory, Linda replied, adjusting her grip on the baby. She's probably lived here for years, knows every trail, every hiding spot. They had been walking for what felt like hours when the bear suddenly stopped. They were in a small clearing, surrounded by enormous pine trees that seemed to reach all the way to the storm-covered sky. In the center of the clearing was something that made them all stop and stare. It was a cave, but not a natural one. Someone had carved it into the side of a small hill, creating what looked like a primitive shelter. Outside the cave entrance, there were signs of recent habitation. The remains of a small fire, some basic supplies covered by a tarp, and something that made Zara's heart skip a beat. Baby supplies, bottles, diapers, formula, and a small basket lined with soft blankets. "Someone's been living here," Ivy said, stating the obvious. "Someone with a baby." The bear approached the cave entrance and made a soft chuffing sound. From inside the cave, impossibly, came an answering sound. Not human, but not quite animal either. The bear's entire demeanor changed, becoming excited, almost joyful. "There's someone in there," Linda whispered. The bear disappeared into the cave, and moments later, she emerged with something that made all of them gasp. Walking beside her, moving with the uncertain steps of someone very young, was a child. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed far too wise for her age. The child was dressed in simple, clean clothes, and she moved toward the bear with complete trust and familiarity. When she saw the strangers in the clearing, she didn't run or hide. Instead, she looked directly at the baby in Linda's arms and smiled. "Mama," the child said, her voice small but clear. Linda's legs nearly gave out. What did she say? The little girl approached them fearlessly, reaching out tiny hands toward the baby. "Mama come home?" Zara's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. This child has been living here, with the bear, but how is that possible? And why does she think the baby is her mother? The bear seemed to understand the child's words. She nudged the little girl gently, then looked at Linda expectantly, as if waiting for permission for something. "I think," Linda said slowly, "she wants me to let the child see the baby." "That could be dangerous," Ivy protested. "We don't know anything about this child or how she got here." But Linda was already kneeling down, bringing the baby to the little girl's eye level. The moment the child saw the infant's face clearly, her entire expression changed. Joy, recognition, and something that looked like relief flooded her features. "Baby sister," the child said, touching the infant's tiny hand with infinite gentleness. "Told you she come back." The baby, who had been fussing intermittently during their journey through the forest, immediately calmed. She turned her head toward the little girl's voice, and for the second time that night, Zara witnessed something that should have been medically impossible. The baby smiled, a real, conscious smile of recognition. "That's not possible," Ivy breathed. "Newborns don't smile deliberately until they're at least 6 weeks old." The bear was watching this interaction with what could only be described as satisfaction. She made a low, rumbling sound that seemed almost like purring, and both children turned to look at her with obvious affection. "This bear," Zara realized with growing amazement, "has been taking care of this child. And somehow, she knew to bring us here. She knew these children belonged together." Linda's eyes filled with tears as she watched the two children interact. Sisters. They're sisters. But how did they get separated? And how did this little girl end up living in the forest with a bear? The little girl seemed to understand that they had questions. She pointed back toward the cave, then at the baby, then at herself. "Bad men take baby sister. Mama bear, save me. We wait long time." "Bad men," Ivy repeated. "She's talking about the trafficking ring. They must have taken the baby, but somehow this child escaped." "Or was left behind," Zara added grimly. "Maybe they thought she was too old, or too likely to remember and talk about what happened." The bear moved to the cave entrance and made another soft sound. This time, a different sound came back. Distinctly human, but weak and strained. "There's someone else in there," Linda said, rising to her feet. The little girl nodded solemnly. "Mama sick. Very sick. Need doctor? Zara's heart clenched as she understood. Their real mother. She's in the cave. They followed the child and the bear into the cave, Ivy bringing the portable incubator and medical kit. The cave was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, with several chambers connected by narrow passages. In the deepest chamber, lying on a bed of soft pine boughs and covered with clean blankets, was a woman. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with the same dark hair as both children. Her face was pale and drawn, and she was burning with fever. When she saw them enter, her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, don't let them take my babies again." Linda knelt beside her, still holding the infant. "It's okay, we're doctors. We're here to help. What's your name?" "Sarah," the woman replied, struggling to sit up. "Sarah Morrison. These are my daughters, Emma and Grace." Zara felt the world tilt around her. Morrison? But the record said Rebecca and David Morrison were the parents. Sarah's face contorted with pain and anger. "Rebecca is my sister. She's been trying to take my children since Emma was born. She can't have children of her own, and she became obsessed with mine." "Your sister?" Ivy looked confused. But the accident report said the parents died in a car crash. "There was no accident," Sarah said weakly. "Rebecca and her husband staged it. They needed a way to legally claim my babies, so they created false identities and fake death certificates. They were going to sell Emma to the highest bidder and keep Grace for themselves." The pieces were finally falling into place. The bear, somehow understanding that children were in danger, had been protecting Emma in the forest while Sarah recovered from whatever had made her sick. When Grace was taken, the bear had known to go to the hospital to get help. "How did you escape?" Linda asked gently. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I was supposed to die. Rebecca poisoned me, but not enough to kill me quickly. She wanted it to look like I died from grief after losing my children. But Emma found me and brought me food and water, and the bear protected us both." The little girl, Emma, had been listening to this conversation with the gravity of someone much older. Now she moved to her mother's side and took her hand. "Mama Bear said, 'Baby sister, come home,'" Emma said solemnly. "Said, 'Good people, bring her back.'" Zara looked at the massive bear, who was sitting peacefully in the corner of the cave, watching over all of them with gentle eyes. The idea that a wild animal could understand and orchestrate such a complex rescue seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. "We need to get you to a hospital," Zara told Sarah. "You need proper medical care, and we need to contact the authorities about your sister in this trafficking ring." But Sarah shook her head weakly. "Not the hospital. Rebecca has people there. They'll finish what they started." "Then we'll go somewhere else," Linda said firmly. "I have contacts at hospitals outside the county. We can get you help and make sure you and your daughters are safe." The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the air above them, growing louder by the second. The bear's head snapped up, her ears flattened against her skull. "They found us," Ivy said, fear creeping into her voice, but Emma shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Number Mama Bear called friends. She very smart." Through the cave entrance, they could see lights approaching through the forest. But these weren't the harsh white beams of their pursuers' flashlights. These were softer, more natural, and they were accompanied by sounds that made the bear relax visibly. More bears were emerging from the forest. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, surrounding the clearing in a protective circle. They moved with purpose and intelligence, positioning themselves between the cave and any potential threats. "I don't believe this," Ivy whispered. She called for backup. The helicopter circled overhead, but it couldn't land in the dense forest. The sounds of their human pursuers had stopped completely, presumably because they had encountered the army of bears that now guarded the clearing. "How is this possible?" Zara asked, though she was beginning to suspect that tonight had moved far beyond the realm of normal possibility. Sarah smiled weakly, reaching out to touch the bear's massive paw. "She's been watching over this forest for years. When Emma was born, this bear started showing up around our house. At first, I was terrified, but she never showed any aggression. She was just watching, protecting. And when your sister took the children?" The bear followed them. "She found Emma when Rebecca's people abandoned her in the forest. They thought she'd die of exposure, but the bear kept her warm and fed." Sarah's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "Then she went to find Grace. She's been searching for 3 days. Emma nodded solemnly. "Mama, bear very sad when baby sister gone. She cry like real mama." The baby in Linda's arms made a soft cooing sound, and all the bears in the clearing responded with gentle rumbles. It was as if they were welcoming her home, acknowledging her as part of their extended family. "We're safe here," Sarah said, her eyes closing with exhaustion. "The bears won't let anyone hurt us, but I need to tell you everything about Rebecca, about the trafficking ring, about how deep this goes." Zara settled in beside her, checking her pulse and temperature while Linda prepared formula for baby Grace. "Tell us everything. We're not going anywhere." And in the safety of the cave, surrounded by the most unlikely guardians imaginable, Sarah began to reveal the full scope of a conspiracy that reached far beyond a simple baby trafficking ring, one that involved corruption at the highest levels of the medical system, and one that would require all their courage to expose. Outside, the Bear family kept their vigil, and the storm finally began to clear, revealing the first hints of dawn on the horizon. Sarah's breathing had stabilized somewhat after Linda administered some basic medical care from their emergency kit, but her condition was still serious. As the morning light filtered through the cave entrance, the full extent of what had been done to her became visible. Her arms showed multiple injection sites, and her skin had the pallor of someone who had been systematically poisoned over time. "Tell me about Rebecca," Zara said gently, monitoring Sarah's pulse while Emma curled up beside her mother with baby Grace sleeping peacefully between them. "How long has this been going on?" Sarah's eyes grew distant, pain flickering across her features. "It started when I was pregnant with Emma. Rebecca had been trying to have children for years with her husband David. Multiple miscarriages, failed fertility treatments. She became obsessed with my pregnancy, wanting to be involved in everything." "That doesn't sound unusual for a sister," Ivy observed, though her tone suggested she suspected there was more to the story. "At first, I thought it was sweet," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "She came to every appointment, helped me set up the nursery, even moved into my house during the last month of pregnancy to help out. But after Emma was born, she wouldn't leave." Emma, who had been listening with the serious expression that seemed permanent on her young face, spoke up. "Aunt Rebecca scary. She hold me too tight, make me cry." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair gently. "Rebecca became convinced that Emma was meant to be her daughter. She said I was too young, too inexperienced to raise a child properly. When I told her she needed to go back to her own home, she threatened to call social services and report me as an unfit mother. But you kept Emma," Linda said, adjusting baby Grace's position so she could feed more comfortably. "I tried to, but Rebecca is very powerful in this county. Her husband David is a county judge, and she has connections throughout the medical and legal systems. When I became pregnant again with Grace, she saw it as another opportunity." The bear that had rescued them made a low, warning sound from the cave entrance. Through the growing daylight, they could see that the other bears had formed a wider perimeter around the clearing, but they remained calm and watchful rather than agitated. "What is it, Mama Bear?" Emma asked, using the name she'd apparently given their protector. The bear's ears were pricked forward, listening to something in the distance. Then they heard it too, the sound of vehicles moving slowly through the forest, engines straining against the rough terrain. "They're still looking for us," Zara realized. But Sarah shook her head weakly. "Those aren't Rebecca's people. They can't get vehicles this deep into the forest. The trails aren't wide enough." As if summoned by her words, the sound of human voices became audible. But these voices were different, calling out in what sounded like genuine concern rather than the harsh commands they'd heard from the traffickers. "Sarah Morrison, this is Ranger Williams with the Forest Service. Are you out there?" Emma's face lit up with recognition. Ranger Tom. He nice man. He helped Mama Bear when she hurt her paw. The little girl started to run toward the cave entrance, but the mother bear gently blocked her path with one massive paw. The animal's eyes were fixed on the forest beyond, still wary despite Emma's apparent recognition of the voice. "Sarah Morrison. We received a call about missing children. We're here to help." Sarah struggled to sit up, her eyes filled with hope and fear in equal measure. "Tom Williams has been a friend to our family for years. If he's really here—" "But how did he know to look for us here?" Ivy asked suspiciously. "We didn't call anyone." Before Sarah could answer, another voice joined the ranger's calls. This one was female, older, and carried an authority that made even the bears take notice. "This is FBI Agent Martinez. We have evidence of child trafficking in this area. Anyone who has information or needs assistance, please identify yourselves." The mother bear seemed to be weighing the situation carefully. She looked at Sarah, then at Emma, then back toward the voices in the forest. Finally, she made a decision. She let out a long, resonant call that echoed through the trees. The response was immediate. "Did you hear that? That sounded like a signal. Tom, you said there were reports of a bear family in this area." "More than reports," came Ranger Williams' voice, closer now. "There's been a mother bear with unusual behavior patterns for the past several months. Protective rather than territorial. Some of the local families have reported her watching over their children from a distance." Emma giggled softly. "Mama bear watch over lots of babies. She liked babies very much." Sarah's eyes widened as she processed this information. How many other families? How many other children has she been protecting? "I don't know," Emma said seriously, "but she's very busy, always checking on everyone." The implications of this statement sent chills through Zara's mind. If the bear had been protecting multiple families, and if those families had been targeted by the trafficking ring— "Agent Martinez," Sarah called out weakly, her voice barely carrying beyond the cave entrance. "I'm Sarah Morrison. I have information about the trafficking operation." The voices outside went silent for a moment, then became urgent and coordinated. "Sarah Morrison. Ma'am, we've been looking for you for 3 days. Your sister Rebecca reported you and your children missing. Are you injured? Are your children with you?" Sarah's face went white. "Rebecca reported us missing. But she's the one who—" "It's a trap," Linda said immediately. "She's using the authorities to find you." But Emma was shaking her head vigorously. "No, no. Ranger Tom, good man. He helped Mama Bear. He no work with bad aunt." The mother bear seemed to agree with Emma. She moved to the cave entrance and after a moment's hesitation stepped outside into the clearing. The other bears maintained their positions but didn't follow her. Through the cave entrance they could see a small group of people emerging from the forest. Ranger Williams was a middle-aged man in uniform, carrying no weapons and moving with the careful, respectful pace of someone who understood wild animals. Beside him was a woman in a dark suit who could only be Agent Martinez, and behind them were two more people in FBI windbreakers. The moment Ranger Williams saw the mother bear, his entire demeanor changed. He stopped walking and held up a hand to signal the others to do the same. "Well, hello there, beautiful," he said softly to the bear. "It's good to see you again." The bear approached him slowly, and to everyone's amazement she allowed him to scratch behind her ears. "Tom has been treating injured wildlife in this forest for over 20 years, Sarah explained. "He's the one who helped Mama Bear when she got caught in a trap last spring." Agent Martinez was scanning the clearing, taking note of the other bears positioned around the perimeter. "This is unprecedented. I've never seen behavior like this from wild animals." "They're protecting something," Ranger Williams said. His eyes focused on the cave entrance. "Or someone." Emma couldn't contain herself any longer. She ducked under the mother bear's protective stance and ran toward Ranger Williams, throwing her small arms around his legs. "Ranger Tom, Mama Bear bring baby sister home. She very smart." The ranger's eyes filled with tears as he knelt down to Emma's level. "Emma, sweet girl, we've been so worried about you. Where's your mama? Is she okay?" "Mama's sick. Bad aunt put bad medicine in Mama. But Mama Bear keep us safe." Agent Martinez had been listening to this exchange with growing intensity. She spoke into a radio clipped to her collar. "This is Martinez. I need a medical team at these coordinates immediately. And get me Director Chen on the line. We have a situation that's bigger than we thought." Sarah appeared at the cave entrance, supported by Zara and Linda. The sight of her, clearly weak and ill, galvanized the rescue team into action. "Sarah Morrison," Agent Martinez said, approaching carefully. "I'm Agent Elena Martinez, FBI. We've been investigating reports of child trafficking in this region. Your sister Rebecca has been very concerned about your disappearance." "My sister Rebecca is the one behind the trafficking operation," Sarah said, her voice stronger now that help had arrived. "She's been systematically poisoning me and stealing my children to sell them to the highest bidders." Agent Martinez's expression didn't change, but her hand moved subtly to her radio. "That's a very serious accusation, Mrs. Morrison. What evidence do you have to support this claim?" "I have the injection sites on my arms where she administered the poison. I have my daughter Emma as a witness to what happened. And I have documentation that proves Rebecca and her husband created false identities to claim my children after my supposed death." "Documentation?" Agent Martinez asked. Linda stepped forward. "I have some of it. False medical transfer orders, forged signatures from doctors who weren't even on duty. There's a whole network of people involved in this operation." Agent Martinez was quiet for a long moment, studying the group. Then she made a decision that surprised everyone. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to tell you something that's going to be difficult to hear. Your sister Rebecca didn't report you missing 3 days ago. She reported you missing 6 months ago." Sarah stared at her in confusion. "That's impossible. I've been here for less than a week. According to Rebecca's statements to local police, you disappeared 6 months ago, with both your children. She's been conducting an extensive search, even hiring private investigators. She's been presenting herself as a distraught aunt trying to find her missing sister and nieces." The mother bear, who had been calmly observing this exchange, suddenly became agitated. She moved between Sarah and Agent Martinez, making low warning sounds. "There's something wrong here," Emma said, her childlike wisdom cutting through the confusion. "Mama Bear no like FBI lady." Zara's instincts, which had been quiet during the relief of finding help, suddenly screamed danger. Agent Martinez, can you show us your identification? The woman's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted subtly. Of course. She reached into her jacket, but instead of pulling out a badge, her hand emerged with a small device that looked like a phone. Step away from the family, she said, her voice now cold and professional. All of you. Now. The device in her hand wasn't a phone. It was some kind of signal transmitter. As she activated it, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air again, much closer this time. You're not FBI, Linda realized. No, the woman said with a slight smile. But I am very good at my job. Rebecca Morrison pays well for results. Ranger Williams, who had been holding Emma protectively, looked genuinely shocked. Elena, what are you doing? These people need help. Ranger Williams is legitimate, the fake Agent Martinez said. Unfortunately, he's also a complication we didn't anticipate. The mother bear's response was swift and decisive. She reared up to her full height and roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground. Immediately, all the other bears in the clearing began moving inward, forming a tight protective circle around the humans. You made one mistake, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with anger. You assumed the bears would be afraid of you. The fake agent was backing toward the forest, her confidence clearly shaken by the sight of dozens of massive bears converging on their position. This isn't over. Rebecca has resources you can't imagine. Legal authority, medical connections, law enforcement contacts. She will get those children. Why? Zara demanded. Why is she so determined to have Sarah's children specifically? The woman paused, a cruel smile playing at her lips. Because they're special. Both girls have a rare genetic marker that makes them extremely valuable to certain buyers. Medical research facilities, private collectors who want perfect specimens for their experimental programs. They're not specimens, Sarah said fiercely. They're my daughters. They're products, the fake agent replied coldly. And products need to be delivered to their purchasers. The helicopter was directly overhead now, and ropes were dropping from it. Armed figures began rappelling down, but they landed outside the circle of bears and seemed hesitant to approach. Ranger Williams was speaking urgently into his radio. This is Williams requesting immediate backup at my location. We have a federal impersonation situation and multiple armed hostiles. I repeat, requesting immediate assistance. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Ranger Tom, Mama Bear family very big, very strong. Bad people can't hurt us here. As if to prove her point, the sound of more bears could be heard approaching through the forest. Not just a few, but what sounded like dozens more. The helicopter pilots, seeing the mass of wildlife converging on the clearing, began to pull back to a safer distance. This is impossible, one of the repelling figures called up to the helicopter. There are too many of them. We can't get close enough. The fake Agent Martinez was now completely surrounded by bears, with no clear path to escape. Her confidence had evaporated entirely. How many bears are there in this forest? Ivy asked Ranger Williams in amazement. I thought maybe 20 or 30, he replied, his own voice filled with wonder. But this looks like every bear in a 50-mile radius has come here. Emma smiled up at him. Mama Bear has very big family. She tell them baby's in danger. They all come to help. The mother bear approached the fake agent slowly, deliberately. The woman was now visibly terrified, probably realizing that her expensive equipment and trained operatives were no match for the raw power of nature protecting its own. Please, she whispered. I was just doing a job. The bear stopped just inches from her, close enough that the woman could feel the animal's breath on her face. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then the bear did something unexpected. She sat down and waited. "She's not going to hurt you," Sarah said, "but she's not going to let you leave either. Not until we get some answers." The fake agent looked around desperately, but there was no escape route. The bears formed an impenetrable wall. The helicopter couldn't land safely, and her ground team was too far away to be of any help. "What do you want to know?" she asked finally, defeat clear in her voice. "Everything," Zara said. "We want to know everything about this operation, everyone involved, and where the other missing children are. Because now, looking at the coordinated response of the bear family, and remembering Emma's earlier comment about Mama Bear watching over lots of babies, they all realized that Grace and Emma were probably not the only children who had been targeted. The scope of what they were dealing with was much larger than any of them had imagined, and the stakes were higher than they had ever dreamed. Over the next hour, as genuine FBI agents and medical personnel arrived to take control of the situation, the fake Agent Martinez revealed the horrifying extent of Rebecca's operation. 15 children had been taken over the past 2 years, all with rare genetic markers that made them valuable for experimental medical research. Most had been sold to private facilities operating outside the reach of any regulatory oversight. "But the bears," Ranger Williams said, reviewing the list of missing children with growing amazement. "Every single family on this list lives within the territory of this bear population." Emma, who had been quietly drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick while the adults talked, looked up seriously. "Mama Bear know all the babies. She watch over everyone. When bad people come, she try to help, but sometimes too late." The mother bear, still maintaining her protective position near the captured operative, made a soft rumbling sound. As if in response, 3 more bears emerged from the forest, and this time they weren't alone. Walking between them, protected and guided, were 2 more children. A boy who looked about 4 years old, and a girl who appeared to be around 6. They moved with the same fearless trust that Emma showed around the bears, and their eyes held the same premature wisdom that came from surviving something terrible. "Michael!" Ranger Williams gasped, recognizing one of the children. "The Henderson boy who went missing last month." The little girl was holding the paw of one of the bears as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When she saw Emma, her face lit up with joy. "Emma, you found your baby sister!" The 2 girls ran to each other, embracing with the fierce happiness of survivors reunited. The little boy, Michael, stood back shyly until Emma grabbed his hand and pulled him into their group. "These are my forest friends," Emma announced proudly. "Mama Bear saved them too. We all live together, wait for safe time." Dr. Zara Blackwood watched this reunion with tears streaming down her face. The mother bear hadn't just protected Emma and helped rescue Grace. She had been running an underground rescue operation for months, gathering children who had escaped or been abandoned by the trafficking ring and keeping them safe in the forest until help could arrive. As the morning sun climbed higher, more bears continued to emerge from the forest, and with them came more children. By noon, they had recovered 8 of the 15 missing children, all of them healthy, all of them protected by the extraordinary bear family that had made their safety its mission. Sarah Morrison, now receiving proper medical treatment, held baby Grace close while watching Emma play with her forest friends. The poison was slowly leaving her system, but more importantly, the fear that had haunted her for months was finally gone. "How did she know?" Sarah asked Ranger Williams, nodding toward the mother bear. "How did she understand what was happening to these children?" Tom Williams, who had been working with wildlife for most of his adult life, shook his head in wonder. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if she has some kind of sense about children in danger, almost like a mother's intuition but expanded beyond her own species. Linda Chen, who had documented everything for the authorities, was still struggling to process what she had witnessed. The medical literature has cases of animals showing protective behavior toward humans, but nothing on this scale. Nothing this organized and deliberate. Agent Rodriguez, the genuine FBI agent who had taken over the case, approached the group with news that would change everything. We've arrested Rebecca Morrison and her entire network. 12 people in custody, including 3 judges, 2 police officers, and 5 medical professionals. The fake agent Martinez gave us everything in exchange for protection. And the children who were already sold? Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern for the other families. We're tracking down every buyer, every facility, every person involved. This case is going to expose a network that spans multiple states. Agent Rodriguez looked toward the children playing in the clearing, now under the watchful eyes of at least 30 bears. Thanks to what happened here, we're going to save a lot more children. Emma ran over to her mother, her small face serious. Mama, can we visit Mama Bear sometimes? She gonna miss us. Sarah looked at the massive bear who had saved her family, who had protected not just her children but so many others. The animal's intelligent eyes seemed to understand the conversation, and she made a soft, questioning sound. I think, Sarah said slowly, we're going to be living very close to this forest for a long time, and yes, we'll visit Mama Bear whenever she wants to see us. The mother bear seemed satisfied with this answer. She approached Sarah slowly, gently, and for a moment that none of them would ever forget, she placed her massive paw over Sarah's hand where it rested on baby Grace's tiny form. It was a blessing, a promise, a mother's vow to another mother that these children would always be protected. 3 months later, Sarah Morrison purchased a house at the edge of Pine Valley Forest. Every evening, as the sun set over the trees, a familiar massive silhouette could be seen at the edge of their backyard. Emma would run out to greet her forest mama, sometimes bringing Grace in her carrier, and they would sit together under the stars. 3 months later, Sarah Morrison purchased a house at the edge of Pine Valley Forest. Every evening, as the sun set over the trees, a familiar massive silhouette could be seen at the edge of their backyard. Emma would run out to greet her forest mama, sometimes bringing Grace in her carrier, and they would sit together under the stars. Dr. Zara Blackwood often joined them, having transferred to a new position that allowed her to work with wildlife rehabilitation in addition to her medical practice. She was documenting the bear family's behavior, hoping to understand the remarkable intelligence and compassion that had saved so many lives. Nurse Ivy Chen had established a program at the hospital to train staff to recognize signs of child trafficking. The Morrison Protocol, as it came to be known, had already helped identify and stop 3 other operations in neighboring counties. Linda Hoffman continued her work as a nurse, but now she also volunteered with the FBI task force that was tracking down trafficked children. Her quick thinking and courage on that stormy night had been crucial to breaking open the entire network. And Ranger Williams added a new chapter to his wildlife protection duties. The bear family had become somewhat famous, though their location was kept secret to protect them. He often told visitors that in 30 years of working with wild animals, he had learned that nature's capacity for love and protection knew no boundaries. The children who had been rescued formed their own special bond. They called themselves the Forest Family, and they met regularly for picnics at the edge of the woods, always under the watchful and loving gaze of their bear guardians. Emma Morrison, now 3 years old, had appointed herself as the official translator between the human world and the bear family. She would often be found sitting in deep conversation with the mother bear, discussing important matters like which berries were best for sharing and where the safest places were for children to play. Baby Grace grew into a happy, healthy toddler who showed no fear of the massive animals that had helped save her life. Her first word was bear, much to her mother's amused delight. And the mother bear, whose real name would never be known, but whose love would never be forgotten, continued her vigilant watch over the forest and all the families within it. She had learned that protecting the innocent was not just an instinct, but a calling that transcended species, boundaries, and the limitations that others might place on what was possible. On quiet evenings when the wind moved through the trees just right, the people who lived near Pine Valley Forest could hear a sound that had become a symbol of safety and hope. It was the gentle rumbling call of a mother bear checking on her extended family, making sure all her children, human and animal alike, were safe, loved, and home where they belonged. The trafficking network was completely dismantled. The missing children were reunited with their families or placed in loving homes, and the forest itself seemed to breathe easier, knowing that its guardian angel wore fur and walked on 4 powerful paws. It was, as Emma Morrison would tell anyone who would listen, the most beautiful example of what happened when love was bigger than fear, when protection mattered more than protocol, and when a mother's heart, whether human or bear, decided that no child would ever be lost on her watch. And in the years that followed, whenever children in the area heard stories about monsters in the forest, their parents would correct them gently. "No, sweetheart," they would say. "There are no monsters in Pine Valley Forest. There are only guardians who love children so much that they would move heaven and earth to keep them safe."